Where there is betrayal, there is first a dream repressed, silenced by duty, strangled by guilt. But the mind does not forget what the heart dares not confess. Infidelity, it is not simply a trespass of the body. It is the mind's scream against a cage it never agreed to enter. This is not romance gone wrong. This is the unconscious rising in revolt. Desire in its purest form is not clean, it is not polite, it does not ask permission. It does not wait for you to be ready, and so the betrayer steps forward not because they no longer care, but because they can no longer pretend. The betrayal is not born in the bedroom. It begins in the shadows, a glance that lingers, a need unmet, a fantasy fed in silence. The truth, the betrayer may be honest brutally, so in the only language the repressed ever learn, destruction, and the betrayed, often blind to the slow, silent decay they helped fertilize with denial. We like to call them monsters, but monsters are born of secrets. Secrets society forces us to hide. What we condemn, we often crave. What we repress, we often become. And what of loyalty? Loyalty to a life unlived is not loyalty, it is cowardice dressed in vows. What good is a promise that was never freely made? What value has trust that refuses to see? But this is not a call to cheat. This is a call to wake up. To see infidelity not as the disease, but as the symptom of something deeper, something buried beneath years of silence, sacrifice, and suppressed selfhood. So what should you do? Fear less, see more. Not to become cynical but wise, not to trust less but to love clearer, because betrayal, when understood, teaches more than blind loyalty ever could. It teaches us that the unconscious does not lie. It whispers truths we are too afraid to say aloud. And when you hear it, when you feel it stir, don't wait for the collapse. Ask yourself, what am I repressing? What am I denying? Who am I betraying? Before anyone else does, the greatest betrayal is not when someone else lies to you, but when you lie to yourself. They didn't cheat because they stopped loving you. They cheated because they stopped feeling seen. Love is not always the currency in betrayal. Attention is. Validation is. The power to feel chosen again. Infidelity is often painted in the colors of lust, but it is stitched together with emotional hunger. Not hunger for bodies, hunger for recognition. A man may stray, not because he's wild, but because he's numb. A woman may wander, not because she's cold, but because she's forgotten what it feels like to burn. This is not about excuses. This is about understanding, about seeing what hides behind the act. Behind the broken trust is often a broken self. When someone betrays, they aren't always running from love, they're often running from invisibility. From being reduced to a function, a role, a provider, a caretaker, a routine. Infidelity is not the first sin. It is the final symptom. Desire is primal, but what fuels the act is deeper than lust. It is the need to feel alive again, to feel wanted, not needed, to feel chosen, not obligated. In betrayal, there is ego. Yes, but not always arrogance, often it's desperation. You see, we are not taught to say what we crave. We're taught to perform, to show up, to commit, but never to reveal the shadow behind the smile. So the needs go underground, unspoken, unshared, unheard, and what the conscious mind denies, the unconscious mind finds a way to express, through risk, through secrecy, through transgression. It is not about the third party. It's about what the third party reflects. They reflect the self we lost, the voice we silenced, the edge we buried under domestic comfort. It's rarely about falling for someone else and more about falling out of alignment with ourselves. Because when desire is repressed, it doesn't disappear. It waits, it festers, it distorts, and one day it erupts, not with warning but with rupture. Not with words but with actions. Infidelity becomes a revolt. A rebellion against the persona we wear. A strike against the self we've outgrown. It's brutal, it's selfish, but it's also revealing. It tells the truth that could not be spoken. It exposes the roles we've outlived. The partnerships that became prisons. The agreements we never truly agreed to. And sometimes it's not even about the partner. It's about control. About reclaiming power where one felt powerless, about being desired where one felt dismissed, about being remembered where one felt erased. This is where the psychoanalytic lens pierces deepest. The act of betrayal is not spontaneous. It is an emotional strategy. It is the unconscious solving a problem that the conscious mind refused to name. And so it should not be romanticized, but it must be recognized, because without recognition, it repeats. If we keep telling ourselves that cheating is about sex, we'll miss the truth. We'll miss the fact that the soul was starving long before the body ever crossed the line. You want to prevent betrayal, start listening earlier, not to the words, but to the silence, to the sighs, the distance, the withdrawals, the buried resentment, the ghost of attraction once felt. Ask, where is the power shifting? Where is the attention drying up? Where are the unspoken needs collecting dust? Because betrayal is not random. It follows patterns, it follows pressure, and most of all it follows silence. Silence about desire. Silence about dissatisfaction. Silence about who we're pretending to be, just to keep the peace, and in that silence a scream forms, the scream of the suppressed self, and it will be heard one way or another. And so if infidelity is not random, then betrayal is not sudden. It doesn't begin with a kiss or a message or a lie. It begins in the shadows, long before the act. Something inside shifts. The unconscious starts whispering, I can't do this anymore. This version of me is dying. This life doesn't fit. But the conscious self keeps smiling, keeps performing, keeps pretending everything is fine. There is no explosion at first, only a quiet erosion, a private hunger, a personal drought. And when hunger isn't fed, it doesn't go away. It digs tunnels, it grows teeth, it finds back doors. This is not about morality. This is about machinery. The mind is not a saint, it's a survivalist. When repression is sustained, the unconscious doesn't ask for permission. It makes moves behind the curtain. It acts in dreams, slips of the tongue, uncontrollable urges, and eventually in betrayal. Because what you repress, you don't erase, you store, and what you store builds pressure, and what builds pressure must eventually burst. That burst, that's the betrayal, the affair, the act everyone sees. But no one understands. The world reacts to the betrayal, but rarely asks where it came from, because the root is invisible, buried beneath years of suppressed truth. You see, people betray not because they're evil, but because they're exhausted. Exhausted from being the version of themselves others expect, exhausted from silencing their own chaos, exhausted from playing roles that no longer fit. There is rebellion in betrayal, a rebellion against the self that obeyed too long, that tolerated too much, that became too quiet, and the unconscious, it's honest, too honest. It says what the lips won't. It craves what the ego shames. It wants what the conscience condemns. This rebellion doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from years of compromise, of unmet emotional needs, of desires buried in favor of duty. At some point, the unconscious starts fighting back, not with words but with behavior, self-sabotage. Impulsive choices, accidental, texts, unintended, encounters, they're never truly accidental. They are the unconscious saying, if you won't free me, I'll break free. And this is where the deepest pain lies. Because betrayal is often not about the other person, it's about the self that's been repressed, denied, muted. In betrayal, people often say, I don't know who I became, but the truth is they became who they already were when no one was watching. This isn't justification, it's revelation. Until we understand the unconscious, we will always be shocked by betrayal, always caught off guard, always treating the symptom, never the root. The real betrayal begins when you stop being honest with yourself. When your needs scare you, when your fantasies shame you, when your truth feels too dangerous to live, and so you bury it. But the mind doesn't forget. It remembers everything you suppress and stores it like dynamite waiting for the right spark. That spark might be a fight, a moment of disconnection, an opportunity, or just loneliness, and when it comes, the explosion doesn't ask for permission. It destroys not just the relationship, but the illusion. The illusion of control, the illusion of perfection, the illusion that we are above our instincts. So ask yourself, what have I repressed that is now turning into sabotage? What desires have I buried so deep, they're erupting in disguise? Because the mind, it never forgets, it only waits. The unconscious doesn't just act, it mirrors, it reflects, it reveals what's being hidden. not just in the betrayer but in the betrayed, because betrayal is never one-sided. Not in the emotional dimension, not in the unconscious. You may not have crossed the line, but you helped build the silence. You may not have strayed, but you ignored the distance. You sensed the decay, but you labeled it normal. And this is the deepest cut, that the betrayer, the one who acts, is often expressing the truth both people already felt, but only one dared to confront. This is not blame. It's reflection. What we reject in ourselves, we attract through others, and what we fear to admit, we force others to act out for us. Psychoanalysis doesn't comfort, it confronts. It doesn't ask who is guilty, it asks who was silent first, who compromised truth to preserve peace, who watched the connection rot and smiled anyway. The betrayer often becomes the mirror, not of your weakness but of your denial. You denied the tension, they expressed it. You buried the discontent, they embodied it. You silenced the urge to speak, they screamed with action, because what we refuse to face will find a way to face us. And sometimes, the person who betrays you is showing you the self you left behind, the fire you extinguished, the rebellion you never allowed, the parts of you that never got to breathe. You wanted control, they broke it. You wanted stability, they shattered it. But beneath that wreckage lies a truth you refuse to see. Maybe it was already over, maybe the love had become duty, maybe passion had been replaced by performance, maybe the only thing alive was the mask you both wore. And when masks get too tight, people tear them off, even if it costs everything. You see, betrayal is the unconscious system exposing the lie, not always to destroy the relationship, but to expose its ghost. Because no one betrays in a space where truth is fully alive. They betray where truth was buried, where intimacy became ritual, where connection became task. The one who betrays often becomes the scapegoat for a deeper collapse. But they are also the symptom, the messenger, the eruption of what was repressed between both parties. They carry the blame, but rarely alone, because underneath the surface there was a mutual forgetting, a mutual silence, a shared refusal to confront what was missing. And here's the twist. Sometimes the betrayed carries the same shadows, but in a different disguise, the same longings, the same fantasies, the same hunger, but wrapped in control, wrapped in obedience, wrapped in pride. One acts, the other withholds, but both participate in the silence. And when silence becomes the norm, someone always breaks it. Some through truth, others through betrayal. So ask yourself, what part of you was reflected in the one who broke you? What part of you wanted out, but didn't know how to leave? What truth did they express that you were too afraid to speak? Because betrayal doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes out of everything unspoken, everything swallowed, everything staged to keep the image alive. And when the image becomes more important than the intimacy, someone will eventually set it on fire. That fire, it burns, it destroys, but it also reveals, not just who they are but who you've become. Because the betrayer isn't just the villain, they're the shadow, the buried scream, the emotional reckoning. They do what the relationship couldn't, they say what you both avoided, they express what the dynamic refused to confront, not with grace but with brutality, and in that brutality is the chance to finally see. Not just them but yourself. The mirror has cracked, you've seen the shadow, not just in them but in you. The betrayal burned away the illusion. Now there's no more hiding, no more pretending, only clarity or chaos. And here's the hardest part, what you do next will define everything. Most people armor up, they say, I'll never trust again. They confuse pain with wisdom, they turn scars into shields, but the lesson isn't to trust less, it's to trust better. To trust with awareness, not blindness, because betrayal didn't make you foolish, denial did. It was the refusal to see, the refusal to ask deeper questions, the comfort in routine over reality, the habit of assuming closeness. Instead of checking in, now you know, and that knowledge, it's not weakness, it's power. Not the power to control others, but to finally see them, to read the shifts in silence, to recognize when affection turns to performance, to feel when distance becomes default. This doesn't make you paranoid, it makes you awake. Because the truly strong don't avoid betrayal, they study it. They ask, what was I ignoring? Where did I stop paying attention? What signals did I rewrite just to stay comfortable? Clarity hurts at first. It forces you to revisit every moment with new eyes. You'll see how much you tolerated, how much you dimmed your own instincts, how often you chose peace over truth. But don't hate yourself for that. You weren't weak. You were loyal, loyal to the idea of stability, loyal to the image of connection. Now you become loyal to truth. Because the deeper lesson of betrayal is not vengeance, it's vision, to see what others miss, to see not just who someone says they are but who they reveal themselves to be when no one is watching. You stop listening only to words. You begin listening to patterns, to energy, to how someone handles silence, how they respond to your vulnerability. You don't trust less, you trust cleaner, smarter. You ask harder questions earlier. You don't wait for collapse to confront reality. And when something feels off, you speak, not with accusation but with presence. You don't beg for truth, you expect it. Because now you know anything repressed, ignored, or neglected will find its way out, and it's better to face it now than to watch it destroy later. That's the strength betrayal gives you, not bitterness but awareness. The ability to detect when someone is hiding from themselves, the skill to name the tension before it metastasizes, the maturity to say, I see you drifting, and I won't pretend I don't. You become the one who doesn't play along. You stop doing the emotional labor for both people. You stop preserving peace at the cost of truth. This makes you harder to fool but easier to trust, because people feel safe with those who see clearly. Even if they fear being seen, this clarity won't save every relationship, but it will save you from repeating old patterns, from loving blind, from betraying yourself just to keep someone close. And yes, you may walk alone more often, but you'll never again walk in the dark. That is the quiet reward of betrayal. It strips you of illusion so you can finally choose with eyes open. You will still love, you will still trust, but now you will do so as someone who knows not just what people can offer, but what they can hide, and knowing that is not weakness, it's survival, it's strength, it's seeing everything and choosing anyway.